Welcome to the channel. Please subscribe if you like stories about the ancient world. For centuries, we imagined the Chinchorro as isolated fishermen, their world bounded by the sound of the waves, their gaze fixed only on the horizon of the Pacific. But what if that picture is incomplete? What if the world's driest desert was not a barrier, but a corridor? What if these master mummy makers were also master networkers, part of a vast, ancient web of exchange that stretched from the icy peaks of the Andes to the warm shores of the ocean? Today, we uncover the evidence that the Chinchorro were not a closed society. They were the first great connectors of the Andes, and the objects they treasured tell a story of journeys that crossed the most formidable landscapes on Earth. The proof of the Chinchorro's far-reaching connections lies not in written records, but in the very materials they left in their graves and middens. These are the smoking guns of prehistoric trade. Lapis lazuli, the blue stone of the gods. Imagine the shock of an archaeologist finding a tiny, perfectly polished bead of vibrant blue lapis lazuli in a 6,000-year-old Chinchorro burial. This stone has a single famous source: the remote mines in the Andes of what is now Chile, hundreds of kilometers to the south and east over some of the most rugged terrain imaginable. Its presence on the coast is astounding. For the Chinchorro, this deep blue stone, the color of the night sky and the deep ocean, must have held immense symbolic power. It wasn't a local pebble, it was a piece of the distant mountains, a treasure that spoke of epic journeys and vast social networks. Cinnabar, the blood of the earth. Then there is cinnabar, a brilliant red mercury sulfide mineral. The closest major source is in the highlands of Peru. Finding this material among the Chinchorro suggests that their search for powerful pigments, so essential for their red mummies, drove them to establish contacts with peoples from dramatically different ecological zones and cultures. Obsidian, the sharpest commodity. And let's not forget obsidian, the volcanic glass that makes the sharpest stone tools. By using X-ray fluorescence, scientists can trace a single obsidian arrowhead back to its specific volcanic source. And we find that the Chinchorro had access to obsidian from multiple distant quarries in the highlands. This wasn't just art. It was practical, high-tech economics. They were integrated into a network that supplied the best raw materials across southern Peru and northern Chile. How did this exchange actually work? How did a piece of lapis lazuli from a mountain at 4,000 meters of altitude end up in a coastal grave at sea level? Archaeologists propose several models for this ancient globalization. Direct procurement. The Chinchorro as explorers. It's possible that small, specialized groups of Chinchorro undertook long, seasonal expeditions inland. Following river valleys up into the Andes, they would have journeyed to known sources of obsidian, pigments, and other valuables. This would have required incredible survival skills and detailed knowledge of the desert's hidden waterholes. These were not just fishermen, they were intrepid explorers of the interior. Down-the-line trade, a chain of handshakes. A more likely scenario for the longest distances is down-the-line trade. The Chinchorro on the coast might have traded dried fish, sea salt, and dried seaweed with a group from an intermediate oasis. That oasis group, in turn, would trade some of these coastal goods, plus their own products, with a group from the high foothills. And that highland group would finally trade with the people living near the lapis lazuli mines. An object could take generations to travel from its source to its final user, passing through many hands in a vast, interlocking network of mutual dependence. No single person made the whole journey, but the objects did. This wasn't commerce in the modern sense, It was as much about building social alliances, creating obligations, and facilitating the flow of information as it was about obtaining resources. A shell from the coast found in the highlands was a piece of a story, a token of a relationship that spanned ecological worlds. To truly appreciate the Chinchorro's role, we must zoom out. During their zenith, from 7000 to 2000 BC, other revolutionary changes were happening in the Andes. In the intermediate valleys, the first experiments with agriculture were underway. People were domesticating beans and squash. Higher up in the mountains, communities were beginning to herd camelids, the ancestors of the llama and alpaca. The Chinchorro were not living in a vacuum. They were contemporary with these other pioneering societies. The trade networks we see were the arteries connecting these different lifeways. The Highlanders might have valued dried anchovies from the coast for their protein and salt content. The coastal Chinchorro, in turn, might have received not just pretty stones, but practical goods like wool from camelids or new types of plant foods. This interaction was a two-way street. It wasn't just the Chinchorro receiving exotic goods. Their maritime resources, their salt, their shells, were highly valued commodities in the interior. They were an essential, driving part of the economic and social engine of the entire region. They weren't passive recipients of influence. They were active creators of one of the world's earliest and most resilient long-distance exchange systems. The story of the Chinchorro is forever changed by this evidence. They were not simple, isolated beachcombers. They were cosmopolitans of the Stone Age. Their world was vast, interconnected, and dynamic. The same hands that carefully painted a mummy with red ochre from the highlands were hands that understood the value of a deal struck in a desert oasis, hands that held a piece of a mountain that they had never seen. This redefines their entire civilization. It shows us that the drive to connect, to trade, to explore, is as ancient as humanity itself. The Chinchorro built networks of relationships that were as durable and complex as the mummies they are famous for. They were the foundational layer of the Andean world, a world that would, millennia later, be united by the Inca along roads that perhaps first began as faint footpaths traced by Chinchorro traders and explorers. They teach us that no culture, no matter how unique, is an island. We are all, and have always been, part of a vast, interdependent human network. The next time you look at a map, remember the Chinchorro, and see the deserts not as empty spaces, but as highways of ancient connection. What do you think was the most valuable thing they traded? Practical obsidian or symbolic lapis lazuli? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you want to continue tracing these ancient connections with us, help the channel grow. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell for our next journey.